Nobody had warned them a human was coming. The lecture hall on level 7 of the Galactic Academy held 300 students from 40 different species. They sat in curved rows that rose like steps toward the ceiling. Blue light from the gas giant outside the windows filled the room with a soft glow. Professor Kilrani stood at the front. Her body was made of living crystal, and she sparkled when she moved. She was explaining how different species breathe different gases when the door slid open. Everyone turned to look. A human walked in. He was not very tall by human standards. He had brown skin, short black hair, and wore the simple gray uniform of an exchange student. He carried a bag over one shoulder and looked around the room with curious eyes. Then he smiled. The reaction was immediate. A student from the Mellow system made a high-pitched sound of fear. Two insect-like beings in the back row pressed themselves against the wall. A large furry creature near the middle actually fell out of his seat, trying to get away. The human smile faded into confusion. Professor Kilrani's crystal body flickered with stress colors. "You must be the transfer student," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Please find a seat." The human nodded. "I'm sorry for being late. My shuttle was delayed." His voice was soft and polite. "My name is David Ward." He walked down the aisle toward the empty seats. Students pulled their legs in, pressed against each other, did anything to avoid being close to him. David noticed this. His face showed hurt, but he said nothing. He simply sat in the first empty seat he found. That seat was next to Rillian. Rillian was small, even for her species. She had soft blue feathers covering her body and large golden eyes. She came from a low-gravity world where her people spent most of their time flying. Here at the academy, she had to walk, and she always felt clumsy. When David sat down beside her, Rillian froze. Her feathers pressed flat against her body in fear. Her heart beat so fast she thought it might burst. David glanced at her. He gave a small, sad smile. "I will not hurt you," he said quietly. "I promise." Rillian could not speak. She just stared at him with her large eyes. Professor Kilrani cleared her throat and continued the lecture. But her voice shook slightly, and she kept looking at David as if he might attack at any moment. Rillian tried to pay attention to the lesson. She really did. But she could not stop watching the human from the corner of her eye. He sat quietly, taking notes on a small tablet. Sometimes he tilted his head when something interested him. Once, he yawned, covering his mouth politely with his hand. He seemed so normal. But Rillian knew what humans were. Everyone knew. Earth was classified as a death world, one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Humans were pursuit predators who could run for hours without stopping. Their blood was toxic. Their bones healed stronger after breaking. They ate plants that would kill most species, and they showed their teeth when they were happy. That smile, that terrible predator smile. Halfway through the lecture, a student from the Pelian species dropped her writing tool. It rolled across the floor and stopped near David's foot. The Pelian student, a small creature with too many eyes, stared at it in horror. She clearly wanted it back, but was too afraid to move. David noticed. He bent down slowly, picked up the tool, and held it out to her. "Here you go," he said with a gentle smile. The Pelian made a squeaking sound and snatched it from his hand, then scrambled backward in her seat. David's smile faded. He turned back to his notes, but Rillian saw something in his eyes. Loneliness, confusion, pain. He did not understand why everyone was afraid of him. When the lecture ended, students rushed for the exits. They moved faster than Rillian had ever seen them move, all trying to get away from the human. Within moments, the room was nearly empty. David stood slowly. He packed his tablet into his bag and looked around at the empty seats. His shoulders dropped. Rillian should have run too. Every instinct told her to flee from this predator. But something kept her in place. Maybe it was the way he had returned that writing tool. Maybe it was the sadness in his eyes. "It was not always like this," she said suddenly. David looked at her with surprise. "What do you mean?" Rillian's feathers ruffled with nervousness. "I mean, they did not always run from you. You just arrived today." David let out a small laugh. It was not a happy sound. "They ran the moment they saw me. I thought maybe my species had done something wrong. But no one will tell me what." Rillian opened her beak to reply, then closed it again. How could she explain that his very existence terrified them? That his smile looked like an attack? That everything about him screamed danger to species who evolved as prey? I should go, David said. Thank you for talking to me. You are the first person who has. He walked toward the door alone. Rillian watched him leave. Her mind was racing. She had been taught all her life to fear humans. Everyone had. They were the monsters from the death world, the apex predators who conquered everything they touched. But that young man with the sad eyes did not look like a monster. He looked lonely. Rillian made a decision. She would find out the truth about humans. Not from files or warnings, but from David himself. It was either the bravest or the stupidest thing she had ever done. The library on level 3 was the quietest place in the academy. Tall shelves filled with data crystals rose toward a ceiling painted with stars. Soft lights floated between the rows, following students who needed them. Rillian sat alone at a reading station in the far corner. Her feathers were pressed tight against her body. Her golden eyes reflected the glow of the screen in front of her. She had searched for one word: human. The results made her blood run cold. Earth was classified as a Category 12 death world. Only 15 planets in the known galaxy had ever received such a rating. Most of them were empty of intelligent life because nothing could survive long enough to evolve. But humans had survived. More than that, they had thrived. Rillian read about human biology first. They were pursuit predators, which meant they did not catch their food with speed or ambush. Instead, they followed their prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal simply collapsed from exhaustion. No other known species hunted this way. Their bodies were designed for endurance. They could regulate their temperature through sweating, which let them keep moving when other predators had to stop and rest. They could survive extreme heat and extreme cold. They could eat plants that were poisonous to 90% of galactic species. Their bones healed. Not just healed, but grew stronger at the breakpoint. A human with a broken arm would recover with a thicker bone than before. Their blood contained iron, a metal that was toxic to many species. If a human bled on certain aliens, it would burn like acid. Rillian scrolled further. The information got worse. Humans had conquered their entire planet. Every environment, from frozen ice to burning desert to deep ocean, had human settlements. They had driven hundreds of other species to extinction, not through malice, but simply by existing. They spread across their world like fire, adapting to everything. Then she found the military records. During the border wars 200 years ago, a single human battalion had held a defensive position for 18 days against an army of Karth warriors. The Karthans were twice the size of humans and considered the greatest fighters in the galaxy. They had outnumbered the humans 50 to 1. The humans had won. Rillian found footage attached to the file. She hesitated, then pressed play. She watched humans run. They ran and ran and ran, never stopping, never slowing. Enemy soldiers who tried to flee were simply followed until they could not move anymore. The humans did not look angry. They did not look excited. They just kept coming with that same steady pace. And when they caught up to their enemies, they smiled. Rillian stopped the video. Her hands were shaking. She thought about David, his gentle voice, the way he had returned that dropped writing tool, the sadness in his eyes when everyone ran from him. Could that same person do what she had just watched? A new file caught her attention. It was labeled, The Deathworlder's Smile, Cultural Analysis. She opened it. In most galactic species, showing teeth was a sign of aggression. It meant attack. It meant danger. Predators showed their teeth before they killed. But humans were different. They showed their teeth when they were happy. They called it smiling. To them, it meant friendship, welcome, joy. To everyone else, it looked like a threat. When David had smiled at the class, he was trying to be friendly. He was trying to show that he meant no harm. But every single student had seen a predator baring its teeth. Rillian sat back in her chair. She felt dizzy. David had no idea. He thought something was wrong with him. He did not understand that his own body, his own expressions, his own nature made him terrifying to look at. The library door opened. Rillian looked up to see a group of students approaching her station. She recognized them from her history class. There was Melix, a tall being with 4 arms. Beside him were two smaller students from the Hive Collective. They did not look friendly. "We saw you talking to the human," Melix said. His voice was cold. "You should stay away from him." Rillian's feathers ruffled. "He seems nice." "Nice." Melix made a sound of disgust. "Did you not read what his species is capable of? They're monsters. They do not belong here. He did not choose where he was born. That does not matter." Melix leaned closer. "Listen to me, little bird. That human is dangerous. His people have killed billions. They conquered their own world and would conquer ours if they could. Do not be fooled by his soft voice and sad eyes. That is how predators work. They make you feel safe before they strike." Rillian wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Melix straightened. "Stay away from him. For your own good." The group left without another word. Rillian looked back at her screen. The files were still open. Pages and pages of horror, all connected to one species. But she also remembered something else. A piece of information buried in one of the cultural files. Humans had a concept called friend. It meant someone they cared about, someone they would protect. And when humans made friends, they were loyal beyond reason. They would fight for their friends, die for their friends, cross galaxies for their friends. If the files were true, then humans were the most dangerous beings in existence. But they were also capable of the deepest loyalty. Rillian closed the files and stood up. Her decision was made. Tomorrow, she would talk to David again. She wanted to understand the human, not just fear him. Lunch period at the Galactic Academy was always loud. Hundreds of species gathered in the main cafeteria, eating foods from across the galaxy. The noise of different languages, the smell of strange meals, and the movement of alien bodies created a chaos that most students found comforting. Today, the chaos had a hole in it. David sat alone at a table near the window. The tables around him were empty. Students walked past with their trays, looked at him, and quickly moved to the other side of the room. Some did not even try to hide their fear. They simply turned and went the opposite direction. David ate his meal slowly. It was some kind of vegetable dish the kitchen had prepared specially for him, since most galactic food was not safe for humans. He did not look up. He did not try to catch anyone's eye. He just sat there, alone, staring at his plate. Rillian stood at the entrance of the cafeteria with her own tray. Her heart was beating fast. Every instinct told her to find a seat far away from the human, to be safe, to be smart. Instead, she walked toward him. The cafeteria grew quieter as she moved. Students stopped talking to watch. By the time she reached David's table, the silence had spread across half the room. She sat down across from him. David looked up with wide eyes. "What are you doing?" "Eating lunch," Rillian said. Her voice shook only a little. "Is that not allowed?" "No, I mean—" David looked around at all the staring faces. "You do not have to do this. People will think badly of you. Let them think." David stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Rillian forced herself not to flinch. She reminded herself what she had learned. The smile meant happiness, friendship, not danger. "Thank you," David said quietly. "I do not even know your name." "Rillian. I am from a kestrel system. The low-gravity world? I read about it. Your people can fly, right?" Rillian felt a small spark of pride. "Yes. Well, on our home world we can. Here, the gravity is too strong. I have to walk like everyone else. That must be hard." "It is. But I wanted to study at the academy. Some things are worth the difficulty." They ate in silence for a moment. Around them, the cafeteria slowly returned to its normal noise level. But Rillian noticed that people kept watching them. Some with curiosity, most with concern. "Can I ask you something?" David said. "Of course. Why is everyone afraid of me? I have tried to be polite. I smile at people. I keep my distance. But they run for me like I am going to hurt them." He set down his eating tool. "What did I do wrong?" Rillian hesitated. How could she explain? "It is not what you did," she said carefully. "It is what you are. A human. A Deathworlder. Your planet is very dangerous. Your species is very capable. Most of us grew up hearing stories about humans. Scary stories." David's expression fell. "I'm not scary. I just want to learn about other cultures. That is why I volunteered for this program. I believe you, but it will take time for others to see that." David nodded slowly. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a small device. Can I show you something? Rillian leaned forward as he activated the screen. An image appeared of a furry creature with 4 legs and a long tail. It had a wide face and a tongue hanging out of its mouth. This is Bruno, David said. His voice was warm with affection. He is my dog. I left him with my parents when I came here. What is a dog? A companion animal. Humans have kept them for thousands of years. We bred them from wolves. Rillian's feathers stood up in alarm. Wolves? The pack predators. Yes. A long time ago, humans and wolves learned to work together. We fed them, and they helped us hunt. Over generations, they changed. They became dogs. Now they are our friends. Our family, really. Rillian stared at the image. You turn a predator into a friend? We turn each other into friends. Dogs change humans too. Made us more social, more caring. David smiled at the picture. Bruno sleeps in my bed at home. He follows me everywhere. When I'm sad, he knows, and he comes to sit with me. That is... Rillian searched for the word. Beautiful. David looked at her with those strange, forward-facing eyes. Humans are not monsters, Rillian. We can be dangerous, yes, but we can also be kind. We can love. We can make friends with anyone, even wolves. He paused. Even aliens who are afraid of us. Before Rillian could respond, a shadow fell over their table. She looked up to see Borix standing there. He was a Carthan, nearly 7 feet tall, with thick gray skin and tusks jutting from his lower jaw. Behind him stood 4 more Carthans, all equally large. Borix was known as a bully. His species prided themselves on being warriors, and he never let anyone forget it. So, Borix said, his voice like grinding rocks, "The little bird has made a friend." How touching. David stood slowly. Even standing, he barely reached Borix's chest. But he did not step back. "We do not want any trouble," David said calmly. Borix laughed. "The Deathworlder does not want trouble." How funny. He leaned down until his face was close to David's. "Listen to me, human. You do not belong here. Your kind is not welcome. Leave the academy, or we'll make you leave." David's smile had faded, but he did not look afraid. "No," he said simply. The cafeteria went silent again. Borix's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I said no. I have every right to be here. I passed the same tests as everyone else. I will not leave just because you do not like my species." For a long moment, no one moved. Rillian could feel the tension like electricity in the air. Then Borix stepped back. "This is not over, human." He turned and walked away, his followers close behind. David sat down slowly. His hands were shaking slightly. "Are you okay?" Rillian asked. "Yes." David took a deep breath. "Just not used to being threatened by aliens. It is a new experience." Despite everything, Rillian found herself laughing. After a moment, David joined her. It felt good to laugh with a friend. 3 days passed after the cafeteria incident. 3 days of whispers and stares. 3 days of other students warning Rillian to stay away from the human. She ignored them all. Every day, she sat with David at lunch. They talked about their home worlds, their families, their dreams. David told her about Earth's oceans and forests. Rillian described the endless skies of her home, where people flew through clouds of pink and gold. They were becoming real friends. But Borix had not forgotten. It happened on the 4th day, in the corridor outside the science wing. Rillian and David were walking together after class, discussing a lecture about planetary formation when the Carthans appeared. There were 6 of them this time. They blocked the corridor completely. Students who had been walking nearby suddenly found reasons to be somewhere else. Within seconds, Rillian and David were alone with the warriors. Borix stepped forward. His tusks gleamed in the artificial light. "I warned you, human." David stopped walking. His body went still. "I remember. You should have listened." Borix cracked his knuckles. The sound was like breaking rocks. "Now we must teach you a lesson." "I do not want to fight," David said. His voice was calm and steady. "There is no reason for this. The reason is simple. You do not belong here. Your species is a plague. Everywhere humans go, death follows. We are doing the galaxy a favor." Rillian felt fear crawling up her spine. She was small and weak compared to the Carthans. If they decided to hurt her and David, there was nothing she could do to stop them. But she would not run. "Leave him alone," she said. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "He has not done anything wrong." Borix laughed. "The little bird speaks. How brave." He looked at his companions. "Should we teach her a lesson, too?" One of the other Carthans grinned. "Why not?" She chose to side with the Deathworlder. She should share his punishment. Borix nodded. "Yes, that seems fair." He took a step toward Rillian. And something changed. David moved. Not fast, not aggressive. He simply stepped between Rillian and Borix. But the way he did it was different. His shoulders squared. His feet planted firmly on the ground. His eyes locked onto Borix with an intensity that had not been there before. He was still smiling, but the smile had changed. It was wider now, showing more teeth. And his eyes were cold. "Do not touch her," David said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it, something ancient and dangerous. Borix paused. The other Carthans shifted uncomfortably. "You threaten me?" Borix said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "I'm telling you facts." David did not blink. "You could try to hurt me. I cannot stop all 6 of you, but you will not touch my friend. That is not a threat. It is a promise." Rillian stared at David's back. She could see the muscles in his shoulders, tense and ready. She remembered what she had read about humans. Pursuit predators, endurance hunters, beings who could chase prey until it died from exhaustion. Right now, David did not look like a sad, lonely exchange student. He looked like exactly what he was, a predator from a death world. Borix took another step forward, trying to reassert dominance. "You think you can stop us? There are 6 of us and 1 of you." "Yes." David's smile never wavered. "But I only need to stop 1 of you, the one who touches Rillian. And I promise you, Borix, I will not stop. I will not give up. I will keep coming until one of us cannot move anymore. My people call it persistence. It is what we do." The corridor was dead silent. Rillian realized she was holding her breath. She had never seen anything like this. David was half Borix's size, unarmed, outnumbered. But he stood there like he had already won. Because in his mind, he had decided to protect his friend, and no amount of pain or fear would change that decision. It was simply fact now, absolute and unchangeable. This was what humans were. Not just predators, not just survivors. They were beings who could decide something and then make it true through sheer stubborn will. Borix stood frozen. His tusks were still bared, but his eyes had changed. There was something there that looked almost like doubt. "This is not over," he finally said. "It does not have to be over," David replied. "It could just stop. We can both walk away. No one gets hurt. No one loses face. We just go back to our lives and pretend this never happened." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Borix stepped back. His companions did the same. Without another word, they turned and walked away. Rillian let out the breath she had been holding. Her legs felt weak. She reached out and grabbed David's arm to steady herself. David turned to look at her. The cold had left his eyes. He looked worried. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" No, I am fine." Rillian shook her head. "David, I have never seen anything like that." David's expression fell. "I am sorry. I did not mean to scare you. When he moved toward you, I cannot let him hurt you. You're my friend." "I know." Rillian squeezed his arm. "That is not what I meant. I was not scared of you. I was amazed by you." David blinked. "What?" "You stood against 6 Carthan warriors. They're twice your size and trained to fight since birth. And you made them back down. Not with weapons or threats. Just by being what you are." David looked uncomfortable. "I just wanted to protect you." "I know." Rillian smiled at him with her beak. It was not the same as a human smile, but she hoped he understood. "That is exactly my point. You would have let them hurt you, but you would never let them hurt me." David was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, that genuine, warm smile that she was learning to love instead of fear. "You are my friend," he said again, as if that explained everything. And maybe it did. The alarm came without warning. One moment, Rillian and David were walking through the residential corridor on level 9. The next, red lights flashed and a terrible sound filled the air. It was the sound every station resident dreaded. Hull breach. The station shook. Rillian stumbled and fell against the wall. David caught her before she could hit the ground. "What is happening?" she cried. A voice came through the speakers. "Attention, all residents. Asteroid fragment impact on levels 8 through 10. Hull breach in multiple sections. Evacuate immediately." This is not a drill. The corridor filled with chaos. Students ran in every direction, some toward the evacuation routes, others confused and panicking. The station shook again, and Rillian heard a distant sound of tearing metal. David grabbed her hand. "We need to move. Now." They ran together through the corridor. Around them, emergency doors began closing, sealing off damaged sections. The air felt thin already. The station's life support was struggling. They turned a corner and found their path blocked. A group of young students, first years by their uniforms, were trapped behind a sealed bulkhead door. Rillian could see them through the small window, pressed against the glass, their faces twisted with fear. There were 8 of them, maybe 9, and beyond them, through another window, she could see stars. The hull had breached in their section. They were venting atmosphere. "They are trapped," Rillian gasped. David was already at the door controls, examining them. His face was grim. "The mechanism is damaged. The automatic systems sealed the door, but something hit the release. It will not open from this side. Can we override it? Maybe, but..." David looked at the small window again. The students inside were moving slower now. Their oxygen was running out. "There is no time. By the time I figure out the override, they will be dead." Rillian felt tears forming in her eyes. "There has to be something we can do." David was quiet for a moment. He looked at the door, then at the students, then at his own hands. "There is one thing," he said. He began removing his protective gear. The jacket, the gloves, the breathing mask all students carried for emergencies. "David, what are you doing?" The door opens inward toward them. "If I can get it open a few inches, they can push from inside while I pull from outside. Combined force." He handed his gear to Rillian. "Take this. But you need it. The atmosphere is compromised in this section, too." "I know." David positioned himself at the door. He gripped the edges where the seal had failed, finding holes in the damaged metal. "Humans can hold our breath for several minutes. We can survive low oxygen longer than most species, and our muscles can work without air for short periods. It is an adaptation from our predator days. You could die." David looked at her. His eyes were calm. "Those children will definitely die if I do nothing. I have a chance. That is enough." He did not wait for her to argue. He simply began to pull. The door groaned. Metal scraped against metal. David's muscles strained under his uniform. Rillian could see veins standing out on his neck and arms. The door did not move. David pulled harder. His face turned red, then purple. The air was getting worse, and he was using everything his body had. The door moved. Just an inch. But it moved. Inside, the students saw what was happening. They threw themselves against the door, pushing from their side. 1 inch became 2, then 3. David's arms were shaking now. Blood seeped from his hands where the metal cut into his skin. His teeth were bared in that terrible smile, but Rillian understood now. It was not happiness. It was determination. Pure, burning while refusing to give up. For inches. 5. The first student squeezed through. Then the second. Rillian grabbed them and pushed them toward the evacuation route. "Keep going," she shouted. "Do not stop." More students came through. David was making sounds now, grunts and groans that did not sound human anymore. His body was failing. His muscles were tearing. But he did not let go. 7 students. 8. The last one, a small insect-like creature, slipped through the gap. Rillian pulled her to safety. David let go. The door slammed shut again. David collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. His hands were covered in blood. His arms hung limp at his sides. His eyes were unfocused. "David!" Rillian dropped to her knees beside him. "David, can you hear me?" He coughed, smiled weakly. "Did they all make it?" "Yes. Yes, they all made it. Because of you." "Good." David's eyes closed. "That is good." He passed out. Rillian looked around desperately. The rescued students were staring at David with expressions she had never seen before. Not fear, not disgust, something else entirely. "Help me carry him," she said. They did not hesitate. These children who had been taught all their lives to fear humans lifted David's unconscious body together. They carried him like something precious, something sacred. Emergency teams met them at the evacuation point. David was rushed to the medical bay. Rillian tried to follow, but they would not let her in. She stood outside the doors, shaking, covered in David's blood. The students who had been trapped stood with her. None of them spoke. They just waited together for news about the human who had saved their lives. 2 days in the medical bay. That was what the doctors said. 2 days of surgeries and treatments and monitoring. David's injuries would have killed most species 3 times over. Torn muscles, cracked bones, lungs damaged from oxygen deprivation, hands cut to the bone. But David was human. By the second morning, he was sitting up in bed, complaining that he was bored. Rillian sat beside him, watching the medical screen display his vital signs. The numbers were improving faster than the doctors could believe. Human regeneration, they called it. The same adaptation that made broken bones heal stronger was repairing his entire body. "You should be dead," she said. "So everyone keeps telling me." David smiled, though it looked tired. Humans are stubborn. We do not like giving up. Clearly, the door to the medical bay opened. Rillian expected another doctor. Instead, she saw something that made her feathers stand straight up. Students. Dozens of them. They filled the hallway outside David's room, holding gifts and flowers and glowing messages of thanks. Species that had fled from David just days ago now stood together, waiting patiently for a chance to see him. David stared at them with wide eyes. "What is this?" "They want to thank you," Rillian said softly. "Word spread about what you did, how you saved those students, how you held that door even when your body was failing. They have been gathering since yesterday, but they were afraid of me. They still are a little, but now they understand something they did not before. Humans are not just predators. You are protectors too." A medical assistant approached. "Sir, there are gifts for you. Many gifts. Should I bring them in?" David looked overwhelmed. "Ah, yes. I suppose so." The gifts came in waves. Crystal sculptures from the Valorian students. Woven blankets from the Mellow system. Food from a dozen different worlds, all carefully checked to be safe for human consumption. Handwritten notes in languages David could not read, but whose meaning was clear. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." The 8 students David had saved came as a group. They stood at the foot of his bed, looking nervous but determined. The smallest one, the insect-like creature who had been last through the door, stepped forward. "We did not know what humans were really like," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "We were taught to be afraid, but you did not hesitate. You hurt yourself to save us. Strangers, people who had avoided you." She bowed her head. "We are sorry for how we treated you, and we are grateful for what you did." David's eyes were wet. "You do not need to thank me or apologize. I would have done it for anyone. We know." The small student looked up at him. "That is what makes it special." They left their gifts and walked away. But at the door, each of them turned back to look at David one more time. Not with fear, with something that looked almost like love. Rillian wiped tears from her own eyes. Then, to everyone's surprise, Borix appeared in the doorway. The Carthan warrior looked different. His usual aggressive stance was gone. He stood quietly, almost humbly, holding something in his massive hands. "May I enter?" he asked. David nodded. Borix walked to the bedside. He towered over the bed, making David look even smaller than usual. But there was no threat in his posture now. "In Carthan culture," Borix said slowly, "there's a ritual. When a warrior shows true courage, we honor them with a token." He held out what he was carrying. It was a small stone, black as night, polished until it shone. "This is from my home world, given to me by my father. I give it to you." David took the stone carefully. "I do not understand. I thought you hated humans. I hated what I thought humans were." Borix's voice was rough. "Monsters. Killers. But I watched you stand against me to protect your friend. And I heard what you did during the breach. You are not a monster. You are a warrior." He paused. "I was wrong about you. I apologize." David looked at the stone in his hand. Then he looked up at Borix and smiled. This time, Borix did not flinch. "Thank you," David said. "This means more than you know." Borix nodded once and left without another word. Later that day, Professor Korani arrived with news. The Academy Council had voted unanimously to award David the title of Station Guardian. It was the highest honor they could give to a student. You saved lives at great risk to yourself, the crystalline professor said. You showed that courage knows no species. The council wanted to recognize that. David shook his head. I did not do it for recognition. We know. That is why you deserve it. A week later, David returned to class. The lecture hall was the same as before. Blue light from the gas giant. Curved rows of seats rising toward the ceiling. Professor Kilrani standing at the front. But everything had changed. When David walked through the door, silence swept the class. Just like the first time. But this silence was different. It was not fear. It was anticipation. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. 300 students from 40 species, all showing appreciation in whatever way their bodies allowed. Clicking mandibles, flashing colors, stamping feet, singing notes. David stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. Rillian pushed through the crowd and grabbed his hand. Come on, she said, smiling. Let's find our seats. They walked down the aisle together. But this time, no one pulled away. Students reached out to touch David's arm, his shoulder, his hand. Welcome touches. Friendly touches. David and Rillian sat down in their usual seats. But now the seats around them filled up quickly. Everyone wanted to sit near the human. Professor Kilrani cleared her throat. If we are quite finished with the celebration, we have a lecture to continue. There was laughter. Actual laughter in a room with a human. As the lesson began, Rillian looked at David. He was taking notes on his tablet, just like always. But he was smiling. A real smile, warm and bright. The smiling Deathworlder had frozen everyone once. Now that same smile made them feel safe. And Rillian understood the truth at last. Humans were not just the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. They were also the most loyal, the most stubborn, the most willing to sacrifice everything for those they cared about. They were not monsters. They were friends. And once a human decided you were their friend, nothing in the universe could change that. Not even the galaxy's fear.